Really excited to introduce our speaker for the next session. So we have with us Apurva Purohit. She's the president of Jagran Group, and she's going to talk about being the woman boss, unique challenges that women face, and overcoming them. So, ma'am needs no introduction. However, I will give a brief introduction of her work. So, Apurva ma'am is the president of the Jagran Group, one of India's largest multimedia conglomerates. With over 3 decades of experience in the media and entertainment industry, she currently manages a diverse portfolio which includes print, radio, digital, and outdoor. Apurva has worked with marquee organizations like Zee Telefilms, Times of India, and partnered with private equity players like True North, one of India's oldest PE firms. Over the years, Apurva has won multiple business awards and has been named as one of the most powerful women in business as per the India Today Group and Fortune India. She is also a director on the board for several non-for-profit and not-for-profit organizations. Apurva is a leading voice advocating gender diversity in the Indian business landscape and has authored a national bestseller for working women titled Lady, You're Not a Man. In her recently launched book titled Lady, You're the Boss, Apurva aims to empower women and encourage them to achieve their full potential. Drawing from her personal experiences, she talks about how women minimize themselves, suffer from the imposter syndrome, and settle for less than they are capable of because of external prejudices, as well as misguided internal self-beliefs. Through anecdotes and examples, the books suggest ways of overcoming these issues and clear the path towards personal and professional success. Apurva holds a bachelor's degree in science physics and completed her PGDM from IIM Bangalore. Really happy to have you with us, ma'am, and welcome to Women in Corporate Allies 2020.
Thank you, Ruchi. Thank you.
The session will be conducted by Aparna Vedapuri Singh, who is the founder and CEO at Women's Web, a leading digital platform that enables women to tell their own stories. A little bit about Aparna. After a postgraduate diploma in communications from the prestigious Mudra Institute of Communications, Ahmedabad, and working in marketing and business development for a decade, Aparna started Women's Web in 2010, perceiving a need in the Indian market for an authentic platform that served all of women's interests. Since then, she has grown Women's Web to become an integral part of Indian women's daily consumption and a community that now boasts of over 10,000 high-quality contributors and reaches over 1 million users each month. Aparna is passionate about empowering women to chart their own destinies and support each other on their journeys. She has spoken at leading industry events such as Women Tech Makers, the Organization of Pharmaceutical Producers Annual Gala, and served as a mentor with the Google Launchpad and Zone Startups Accelerator programs. Welcome, Aparna, and two very strong, powerful women today for this session. So I hand over the mic to you, Aparna, to take it up from there.
Thank you. Thank you, Aparna, for joining us. So we'll dive right in. So my very first question is, you've now been part of industry for more than a couple of decades. I thought it would be interesting to start with a story that if you really had to, share one incident or story which brings home how gender impacts leadership for women, would you have a, interesting story to share with us?
So obviously I have a lot of anecdotes and a couple of decades. You've been kind, Aparna. I've worked for 32 years now. So it's been a long journey. I think fortunately, as far as organizations are concerned and my journey as a woman leader, I became a leader at the age of 25, 26, right? So through that phase, it's been a reasonably, I wouldn't say that I faced a lot of biases or challenges in being a woman leader. However, I must say that since you've asked for a story, the stories that really resonate with me and bother me even now are the fact that outside of the workspace, when you end up interacting with people, the immediate behavior that they demonstrate towards you is the assumption that you don't have a career, you're a housewife, your interests are limited to schools and whether the staff at home is working or not. So the fact that your interest will be only limited to that sort of bothers me a lot. And I remember quite a few years ago, I bumped into a batchmate of mine he was also from IIM Bangalore, and I bumped into him. He had very well followed my career. He actually turned around and said, "Oh, I've been following your career for the last 15 years. I believe you are the CEO of Radio City and you were with Zee first, etc." So I didn't know what I was supposed to say. I was supposed to say thank you, etc. That you've been following my career. But then the statement he made after that was, Aparna, he says that, so do you work full time or half day?
Right.
Now, I mean, it's not that he doesn't know who I am. He knows that in fact, I was the youngest CEO of my entire batch. He knows that. And then he comes around and says, are you working full time or half day? I mean, how can as a CEO, I work half day? So I didn't know. I just looked at him and said, yeah, half day, balance half, I go for a kitty parties. So these kind of subterranean biases, messages, put downers are the ones that I think continue to bother me even now.
And by the hearts and emojis that are coming up on our screens, I think that's something our audience can really, really relate to. Whether it was 15 years ago or today. I mean, we can only hope that things will change and that subterranean bias, will not be there for the women who come ahead of us. Having said that, I'm sure there have also been bosses in your own career, bosses, leaders in your own career, whether male or female, who have inspired you and who have maybe set some kind of a template for what leadership means when it comes to you. So maybe you could tell us a little about them.
My firm belief, Aparna, and a question that I get asked very often is, are women leaders bad, are men leaders good, or the other way around? And I've always maintained that leadership is gender agnostic. You get good leaders who are men, bad leaders who are men, good leaders who are women, bad leaders who are women. So I don't think it's got anything to do with gender. And therefore your question is very pertinent, because you've asked that across male and female, who have inspired me, what lessons I've learned. And I would say that the lessons, it's not one particular person doesn't come to mind, but I think every person that I've met, every leader I have met, I have equally learned what to do and equally learned what not to do. So for many so I had my share of poor bosses, I had my share of poor leaders, but from everyone there was some lesson. As they say that every human being you meet is either a blessing or a lesson. So there have been valuable lessons I've learned from everybody, and I think the single most important lesson as a leader I learned from a different, a disparate set of leaders is the balance that is required in being a good leader. The balance between being true to the job and equally be empathetic towards the team that you work with. And I personally believe, Aparna, that that's the biggest tussle leaders face, including in these days. So on the one hand, there are the popular leaders who are saying, oh my God, work from home, everybody's fearful, everybody's scared, so let me be kind and gentle and soft. And on the other hand, there are leaders who are saying, no, I don't you just get back to work, and that's how I want you to, otherwise you won't get paid. But I think there's a fine line in between where you can balance the fear people are feeling today and the expectations of the organization and marry both. And I think that's the lesson I have learned through all the leaders, how to balance the empathy that you need to demonstrate to your teams with the objective that you need the organization to serve.
Right. And you also mentioned one very interesting thing, Apurva, when you said that you've learned from people both what to do and what not to do. And that's not something that we often hear people talking about. So I'm very curious to know, what is perhaps an example of a thing that, you would point out as an example of things bosses should not be doing?
So in fact, my first boss ever was a very, very tough lady. She was, no doubt, she was extremely bright, intelligent. I learned a lot of advertising mantras from her. having said that, she was a very unempathetic, uncaring boss who thought that the only way to be a leader is with a danda. And I remember through my first 2 years of working, every day I used to cry. Every day I used to come home weeping and wonder why I was still working with her. And I, in that journey, I persevered through that journey, and I spent 2 years with her. But over a period of time, I realized that that's not a good way to get work out of people, because it is only it's a temporary solution. In the permanency of things, when you want people to be truly engaged with the organization, you have to be tough, but you also have to have love and empathy and caring for the teams. So tough love is a philosophy I have sort of tried to practice, and it has become one of the value systems of any organization I learn. The first thing I go and say, the first value we should have is tough love. Not just tough, but tough love. Both can coexist, and it must coexist.
I love the word that you're actually using, a word like love in this context, because it's really a word we hesitate to use in the corporate context. Tough is great. Like, tough is a word, we all think we should have and we've been told we should have. But love is really a word we hesitate to use because it seems so, wishy-washy, and where is the scope for love in the work world? But I think, what you said about the need for tough love to coexist, that things have to be right for the organization, but you also need to have that empathy. I think that's absolutely, so relevant. And I see that Dibjot Kaur says in the chat box that I always witness that women bosses or leaders are more strict with the same sex than the other way around. I mean, that got me thinking that is it that and this is something I have heard, and I, as you rightly said, there are no good or bad bosses depending on gender. But do female, since we were also speaking about toughness, do female leaders feel compelled to display more toughness because they are perceived as not capable enough, or some of those old stereotypes exist? Do they feel like they need to demonstrate more toughness than the men?
So I would like to give a little nuanced answer here, because this is, Aparna, a very valid point for all the women leaders who are listening out to this conversation. The first thing is, you're absolutely right. It is a fact that women have to be stricter, tougher, etc., because the natural assumption is woman, soft. So she's been stereotyped as the mother, the caring, nurturing mother. So she has to sort of overcompensate for that by becoming tough. Point one. The second thing is that in this overcompensation that she's doing of becoming tough, I think either she ends up becoming too tough and becoming that Iron Maiden, and therefore I keep on saying, lady, you're not a man. You don't have to be like a man. You can be a woman leader with her own strengths and weaknesses. You don't have to emulate men to be successful or to be leaders. The third point, and that is a very important point for everybody, is in this, when we are tough, and either we become too tough or we are too soft, and the balancing we find very hard to do. Even supposing that we manage that balance, I've seen, despite managing the balance, a lot of juniors, a lot of feedback that women leaders get is, oh, I thought she would be more caring. I thought she would understand my problem. Look at that male leader. He's strong. Look at this female leader. She is a bitch, So you get, whatever you do, you may behave exactly like a male leader, but you will get classified as this very nasty woman. And I think that's where the stereotypes have to change of how we perceive women leaders. So we have to ask ourselves that, why do we expect a woman leader to be soft and nurturing? She's a leader. Woman comes later. She's a leader, and as a leader, she needs to be fair. She needs to be tough when it's required to be tough. Why do I expect that she should be motherly and kind towards me? Our expectations are messed up. She's doing her job. She has to be seen as that fair leader.
Has to do that job, right? In fact, the next question I had in mind was right about this, that and we hear many, like when I meet women in the industry who are at my peer level, say 15 years, 20 years, basically 2 decades into the industry. This is one of the things that we all talk about, that, I work with a female majority team, but people who especially work in very mixed teams or even male majority teams, do often say that if I am, and I'm not talking about being mean or, but even if I am firm with my team, if I'm assertive with my team, then I get tagged as being mean, or simply because there is an expectation on me as a woman to be more caring and mother, So having said that, how do we deal with it?
So I think the best way to deal with any stereotyping, any criticism, any finger pointing is to first reconcile in your mind that when you enter the professional sphere, you are first a manager, a professional, and a leader. It's only that you happen to be a woman. Okay. So neither do I need to take advantage of the fact that I'm a woman by looking for special privileges, nor do I have to play to a particular stereotype of what it entails to be a woman, nor do I have to have these ghosts in my mind. Oh my God, if I do this, people will think of me as bitchy. If I do this, I'll become unpopular. If I do this. So I think the 3 levels of change that we need to make is A, see ourselves as leaders and managers first. Just by chance, just chance that you happen to be a female. Point 2, when we approach any interaction, any work, any management, it always has to come from the lens of, I will do what it takes to be a good manager. I really don't want to bother about what people are thinking about me or what people are assuming about me. And the final thing is our mindset. Our mindset has to be true to ourselves. The moral compass has to be an internal moral compass. Because I'll tell you, whatever you do, there'll be 3 people agreeing and 3 people disagreeing with you. Whatever you do. So why do you want to bother?
This is so true, ultimately it's going to be impossible to please everybody in the workplace. And I saw a participant's, comment saying, how do we change these perceptions? And, it's, while on the one hand, I would like to, of course, bring about significant change in workplaces and change perceptions. I do wonder, how, as managers and leaders, do we focus on doing our jobs first, or, and hope that people will change, or how much of our time and energy should we spend around changing perceptions? I'm not sure, what are your views on that?
So, I have this to say. One is that, as I said in my previous answer, perceptions is something that you will never be able to change. After all, they are perceptions. Many times they're not even based in any reality, right? So if it's like fighting with a ghost, how can you fight with a ghost? You can't even, you don't know what's going on in the other person's mind. You don't know what you did triggered off some thought or some behavior in their mind. So first of all, you should not bother about perception management. You should not bother. The second point is that somewhere 10% also, I think women do play to certain stereotypes. So, the 4 stereotypes I talk about, which are based on research done by Professor Cantor, and she said that women get classified into 4 stereotypes: the Iron Maiden, the Earth Mother, the Pet, or the Seductress. So, the world classifies us into being either a seductress or a pet or an Iron Maiden or a mother. And they think that these are the only 4 boxes that women can be part of. sometimes, unfortunately, we play to these stereotypes, whether consciously or subconsciously or unconsciously. I, for example, play to being the mother all the time. So people much older than me, I'm doing beta, and the CEOs who work for me, I'm doing push to them. I'm playing to being the mother all the time. Sometimes we play to being a seductress. Oh boss, please help me with this project, fluttering eyelashes, etc. Oh, this client is so tough for me. I cannot manage this client. We play that role, right? So I think you have to consciously say that I will not be part of a stereotype, because the stereotype boxes you in, and that box we have to walk out of.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that clearly, many women at work deal with, because even if I look at the chat, when I see the, comments that are coming in, that, like Raji Kukreja says, for instance, that I think it's the results that matter and perceptions can never be changed. And Devi from Temenos quotes an instance where she actually got to know that someone who was newly recruited left the organization simply because he did not want to report to a female boss. So, I mean, clearly these do exist, and yes, I mean, we can spend all our time trying to change these perceptions, and of course, many of us are doing work to change those perceptions, but at the end of the day, we have to do our jobs as well. So I think it's really a question of, how much energy do you as an individual want to spend in that space. There's an interesting question coming in from Ruchi. Says that there are biases that many at the workplace harbor when, they say that on the one hand you want equality and on the other hand you want women to be given benefits. I think she's talking about things that are specific to women's lives, such as maternity benefits, for instance, and which is actually being cited as a bias by some. How would you suggest that we respond to such biases?
So I think the only time women need to be treated specially and differently is when they go through the childbearing time. So I myself, as a woman leader, as a person who is very conscious about encouraging diversity in her organization, the only time I am extra caring, soft, giving benefits to women is when they have babies. When the baby, they're just after the time the baby is born till the babies are a year old. I'm all for giving as many advantages to women as possible. After that and before that, I'm equally tough on women, because that itself is a bias. The moment we try to protect women, the moment we try to be extra soft towards women, we actually end up, Aparna, bonsaiing them. Because we don't give them the tough projects, we don't give them the tough clients to deal with, and then they say, oh, but she's not grown as I had anticipated she would grow. But you never gave her the tough roles.
Right.
Now you can turn around and say, no, how can I make her travel so much? How can I give her a late night job? How can I give her a tough client? But she has not said no. You have decided in this paternalistic bias framework that I will not do this. And then you yourself are deciding 2 years later that she's not ready for a promotion.
Right.
So I absolutely discourage special treatment for women except in that 1 year.
I think Raji also brings in an interesting point in the chat, saying even some of these we can fix by having equal paternity leave. So that, yes, I mean, very true. So that we don't just make it the onus of women that they are the childcare providers at home once the biological needs are taken care of. Very true. One related question I had, Apurva, you said, sometimes we ourselves decide that women cannot take on the tough projects. And again, this is something that I've seen happen in the case of many women, that even when they have come back after, say, a maternity leave and they are raring to go, but perhaps, they have been out of the workplace for some time, or they are coming back after a longish break for various reasons. Organizations do assume that women cannot, take on challenging roles. Would you say that as leaders, there is something that we can do to change that?
Absolutely. I think there are two reasons why women
don't. A related question, in fact, from Sri Lakshmi, where she says, how do you mentor women to take on these senior roles and reach the top? Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think that first of all, we must understand the two reasons why women are not themselves picking up the tough roles, and especially when they come back after maternity leave, and even otherwise, and what can we do to change? So what are the two reasons? Reason one is women per se, and we know that out of every research that we have done, Aparna, you would have done, where it is very clear that women are far more tentative and far more lacking in self-confidence than men. They'll be as competent as men. They will have the same skill set, the same talent. They will have got the same positive feedback from the organization. Despite all this, they will suffer from a crisis of confidence. So as women as leaders and mentors, we have to recognize that when a woman is being tentative, she's saying, I'm not sure, I don't know whether I'll be able to do this. It's not because she doesn't have the skill and talent. It's because of her lack of confidence. Whereas a guy who's 80% ready for his job thinks he's 120% ready.
Right.
He's a management trainee. All male management trainees think they should immediately become CEOs. All CXO women, despite being ready, don't want to push themselves to be CEOs. So that lack of confidence is something we have to understand and work with women. Push them. No, you can do it. I believe in you. You can do it. Point one. The second thing is, and that is intrinsic to women, that somewhere we have decided in our lives that we have several roles to play which are equally important. So we have to be a great mother, we have to be a great daughter, we have to be a great daughter-in-law, a great professional, a great boss, a great cook, a great potter, everything we have to be. Now, in these so many roles that you are playing, you will obviously, in the balancing that you are doing, you will say, okay, my God, I have to go home and do the PTA class. I have to teach my son and I have to cook. Why should I take the tough job? So you are always balancing and then not pushing yourself out to take that next role or the tough job. Now, look at it from the boss's perspective, right? If I'm not pushing myself out, I'll not give the job to me. No, I'll give it to somebody else. And men, for them, career is number one priority. Family is always number two, right? And we want to compete with the same men, where for us, family is number one, career is number two. How will we compete? So somewhere we have to ask ourselves, and I strongly believe that there are some parts, which is really the child rearing phase, which is 2 years or 4 years, where priority has to be family. The balance 30 years of your career, priority has to be your job. It cannot be, okay, I'll do this also, and then excel at my job. It will not happen.
Interesting perspective. I mean, would you also say that organizations are also changing in ways that make it possible for people of all genders to have both, or is that too utopian?
So my answer to this question always is that, that thing, that debate we had some time ago, can women have it all? Yeah. My answer to that is yes, women can have it all, not at the same time. So in a 35-year-old career, you will have everything. You will have the money you want, the designation you want, the fame you want, the perfection at home you want, the best cook tag you want, everything you'll get. But it will not happen at the same time. We should not even attempt. So there are certain years where family is priority one. Let us be the best mother, the best wife, whatever in those. Rest of it has to be your career, and in those periods, your F1, your priority one, your first role has to be that of the boss or the manager or the professional. And then over a period of time, you'll get everything.
So we have, I think, a few minutes left. Folks, if you have any questions, please do use the question tab. Since there's a lot of chat on the chat tab, it might be a little difficult for me to track your questions. It would be nice if you could use the question tab. I think we have a question from Priyanka, who says, I'm a UX research trainer, 27 years old. I train men with 30, 40 plus years of work experience, which I obviously don't have. I'm good at my job, but it takes 1 or 2 sessions for them to understand and take me seriously. How do I change that?
So it's a fact, it is a troublesome fact that by just our appearance, our age, the fact that we are women, the automatic supposition with men is, ye to bachchi hai, what will she know? And that the little bullying attitude, the little talking down attitude comes through. How do you deal with that? I feel, one is our skill, which is making us the trainer. So as you said, over a couple of meetings or a couple of discussions, that skill will automatically show. But I also believe a lot in how our appearances, our body language, the way we talk to people. And I often see that women don't bother too much about that. Take me as I am. People will not take you. So if you're going to wear, not power dressing. In my office, for example, a lot of women will come in, short dresses or, skimpy clothes, or resort wear. Now, it's called resort wear for a reason, right? And it's called office wear for a reason. So I think we have to concentrate equally on how we are, how we dress up, how we talk, the confidence we show in our body language. I think all of us need to work at that, especially given that women are always smaller built, more petite, thinner voices, etc. than men.
Another question comes in from Sandhya. She says that considering the deeply patriarchal society and real life challenges that women face, don't you think an employer should be sensitive to the felt needs of women employees?
In what manner?
I'm not very sure what specifically is she talking about. So maybe if we wait for Sandhya.
My answer, if in a general sense, not a specific, my answer in a general sense is that let us understand this: that there are the boss, the manager, the CEO. His goal is growing the organizational imperatives, the business needs, done in a fair manner. Fairness is a very important principle for a good manager and a good leader. Now, please tell me that even I say that about myself, if I'm constantly being softer towards women, if I'm being giving them the easier jobs, how am I being fair to my male managers or my male reportees? So why should I be kinder to women? I understand that 1 year when women have children and they need that why should So I think our expectation that organizations need to be softer, kinder, is actually a double-edged sword. In the moment, you can feel happy, but in the long term, it harms the cause of it.
An interesting one from Radhika. She says, maybe you could give us an example if it has happened to you. How do you manage mansplaining at the drawing table when you propose a concept and someone explains it as what she means is and hijacks the conversation and the idea and the project? Invariably, every time you step up to take something new.
You're absolutely right, Radhika. It happens all the time. It happens to me at my drawing room table. It happens to me in my boardroom. It happens to me when I'm part of an independent board. So it's happening all the time. Earlier, I just used to say, who's going to fight? As it is, we are constantly fighting different battles, right? So I'm not going to fight this battle. If he wants to say that it's his idea, he wants to explain it better, and they can't explain it better, right? But if they wants to do it, let it be. But then over a period of time, I realized that why should I do that? So I've now started saying, and that's a lesson, I stop that person and say, Rajesh, by the way, I said this, whether it's a boardroom or any other, I said, Rajesh, I said this first. You interrupted me. That was extremely rude of you. Let me finish what I had to say. And then you can add. Now they keep quiet.
Yeah, it's it doesn't come easy to us to interrupt, especially when the person doing the mansplaining is somebody who's in a position of greater power than us. But I think if we can teach ourselves how to do it, maybe we cannot always, say it the way you just said it. That would be ideal if we could. But yeah, maybe we can find a way to say it in a way that works for us.
But say we must.
Say we must. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Apurva. It was such a pleasure having you with us.
It's all right.